Well, the Australian energy market operator says that southern Australia will face gas shortfalls 3 years later than originally forecast. So that's at least some good news, but annual shortages are still looming from 2029. What a surprise. The Albanese government also unveiled a deal to source up 40 petajoules of extra gas supply over 4 years from Origin Energy's LNG venture in Queensland. For more on all this, I'm joined by gas and energy analyst Saul Kavonic here on the desk. Saul, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Exactly how good or bad is this new announcement? Sure, it's 3 years further down the line, but what happens beyond that?
Well, let's just be clear, this is not good news, right? So the reason that they've kind of kicked the risk of real shortages down 3 years is because of two things. And the first one is, and it says it in the report, it's that there's been industrial demand destruction and retail demand destruction. So the reason we don't have a shortage is because manufacturing is shutting down because of a lack of gas, right? So this is not something we should be applauding. This is the beginning of the signs of the failure that we're seeing from our gas policies. And the second reason that it's being pushed back is because we have taxpayers now funding and subsidising the extension of coal-fired power stations, which again is not something we should be applauding or rewarding here. Ultimately, what we're seeing here is blue-collar manufacturing workers and taxpayers are paying here in order for our gas shortages not to be causing problems in other parts of the economy. So this is actually an early warning sign of the terrible things that's going to happen to our manufacturing jobs and for taxpayers unless we fix our gas and energy policy.
Well, the policy on this seems to be quite schizophrenic because, of course, you've had Madeleine King say in the last year or two that gas will absolutely be part of the energy transition. The federal government supposedly believes in that, but then the state governments seem to have a different point of view on how all of this will work. No one has a cogent plan for how any of this will happen, the energy transition, and the role that gas actually plays in that.
Look, I think we're in a much worse situation than not having a plan. What we have is an active, multifaceted assault on our energy security over the last 3 years. It hasn't been deliberately designed that way, but it's turned out that way. And so you mentioned Madeleine King, who's probably been the most ineffectual resources minister Australia's seen in a generation. This is the minister who saw her signature gas policy. She went over west, announced a signature gas policy, only to allow the Greens to shunt it a week later, where you've just seen again and again she's been undermined, overruled by her own party. Chris Bowen and Tanya Plibersek are effectively making all the decisions in her portfolio. And every time she tries to do something constructive on gas, Labor's doing a deal with the Greens to undermine it. There's approvals that she could fix tomorrow with the stroke of the pen, but refuses to because there's been a deal with the Greens to keep green lawfare ongoing against some of the biggest economic investments going on in this country.
This deal with Origin, 40 petajoules of extra gas, what will that mean?
It doesn't mean anything. So we get every time now any company signs a gas deal, right? They write it up as a headline so that Chris Bowen can claim a win. So I just want to be clear. So what Chris Bowen is now saying is that there's been only 645 petajoules of gas he's secured for the domestic market since the gas code was implemented in late 2022. I just want to be clear, that is significantly less than the amount of gas the industry was going to produce anyway. So what you've seen since the gas code and the gas price cap that was Chris Bowen's main policy at the end of 2022 is liquidity has dried up, gas investment has halted. We've seen gas prices stay well above the capped gas price. He's exempted the entire industry from his own policy because they know it won't work, but they just don't want to admit it publicly. And then they're claiming as a win, delivering more gas to the domestic market, they're delivering less gas to the domestic market than was going to be delivered before they introduced all of these policies.
It makes a great deal of sense, doesn't it? Peter Dutton has promised to fast-track a final decision on the expansion of the North West Shelf if he becomes Prime Minister. That's the oil and gas region in WA. Madeleine King, who we were talking about before, Resources Minister, she said that it is reckless and moronic, and she claims that it would circumvent due process and open up the door to legal challenges. She said this means the Liberals are teaming up with the Greens, except they're too stupid to know it. What do you make of that?
Well, what we do know is that Madeleine King and her Labor colleagues have been teaming up with the Greens to undermine the gas sector, right? And, you know, particularly this project, right? So The entire energy security of Western Australia is at stake here. The entire town of Karratha. Thousands of blue-collar jobs, not just working directly on this, but this is what supplies the domestic gas to Australia for fertilisers, for the fertiliser industry, which then goes into our agricultural industry, plastics. Pretty much most of the manufacturing base in Western Australia and all our mines are dependent on this kind of gas. So this is and the approval they're talking about here, they're not talking about some big new mine or big new gas development. They're just talking about extending an existing facility that's already been there for 40 years. It's already been 6 years delayed to get to this approval. And now they're delaying it essentially to kick it over the line past the election. So when it comes to doing moronic deals with the Greens, Madeleine King knows all about it because she's already done a number of them.
And we wonder why we're just totally stuffed in this country when it comes to energy. Saul Kavonic, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Caleb.